It is now 7 o'clock. Acting as vice chair, conducting the meeting. Our chair is present but remote, and just confirm that our chair has requested the vice chair here to conduct the meeting in person.
Yes.
We'll begin by taking a roll call since we do have at least one member remote. Mr. Davidson,
Here.
Mr. Hassinger,
I'm here.
Mr. Robbins is present, Mr. Venkatraman is absent, Mr. Wood,
Present.
associate member Andrea, Red Bresnahan.
Here.
Momentary lapse of memory. Staff present with us is Town Planner Fiona Coughlin
Here.
and staff Natalia Allward, Office Manager.
Here.
Excellent. We are all present and accounted for. We'll begin. As usual, our first agenda item is public input. If there is anybody here in the room or on Zoom that wishes to bring a matter to the board's attention that is not on the agenda for this evening's meeting, now would be the time. Raise your hand in the room or on Zoom. Seeing no hands raised, we'll move on to our action item agenda. Action item A is an approval under subdivision control not required plan at 66 North Street, for which the office has not yet received the application materials, so we cannot act on this at this time.
Yes.
We will defer that to a future agenda once the submission has been received and confirmed as complete.
Sounds good.
Action items B and C kind of go together. Bond release request and a bond reduction request, both for the Village at Institute Road, now known as Woodland Hill. We discussed this at the previous meeting, and I think the estimates that we've received from Graves have not changed. The one open issue we had was the question of the flooding issue at the DYS facility across the street on Institute Road, for which we were expecting some additional investigation to take place, and I believe Fiona can report on the results of that.
Yes, absolutely. So, thank you, Dave. So, myself, representatives from Pulte, Stacy and Jenny from DYS, and Jeff Walsh from Graves Engineering went out to the site to follow up on the formal complaint on oh my gosh, when was that? January 10th. So we met there, we walked the site, looked at the ropes course, took pictures, and had a discussion about some of the flow patterns and some of the issues in more depth with DYS. I took a couple of photos that I'll show here. The site is quite wet. However, the short summary of it is that there is no connection that can be made from an engineering perspective to the work that's going on at the Woodland Hill subdivision across the street and the issues that are going on at the ropes course. How we left it was that Stacy and Jenny will conduct some testing, some augering and testing on their part to confirm some history of the land and the soils to see if it's been historically wet, and then they will reach back out to us with those findings. So right now, from a professional standpoint, Graves Engineering and the planning department, because there is no conclusive evidence that we could find to connect the issues, then we don't see an issue with proceeding. I'm happy to answer any specific questions about the site, and we can go from there. And I know Essick is here as well from Pulte to speak to the bond estimates should he need to.
All right. Any questions from the board? Any observations? Issues?
It's an interesting situation over there, but I appreciate the diligence of the staff and Graves in looking into that, and makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad that we did look, take care, do our diligence. But good.
Okay, so I will move out of.
All right, so Unless there is anything else, a motion to approve the requested bond release and bond reduction, either both at the same motion or separate motions, however,
Maybe
anybody, pardon?
maybe separate, just because one is, I can pull up and go through them each, and might be easier from a
Yeah.
All right, so let's proceed with the first one is the bond release. You now have the Graves estimate on screen here.
So I move that we approve the bond release for the off-site improvements to the final withheld amount of $39,000, which is the 20% of the 100% cost.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Natalia has her hand up.
Not a release, I believe. I believe they're talking about a reduction.
Reduction. Thank you.
Yes, that's right. It was presented on the agenda as a bond release, but yes,
Yeah.
the actual action is a reduction.
it was initial request for release.
Yep.
Yep.
Understood, and we
Yes, and as we
discussed that at our
discussed it-
last meeting. And
As we discussed, there were a few little items remaining to be done, not a lot, but
Yep. Yep, no, we discussed that at the last meeting and completely understand.
right, we covered that at the last meeting.
Yep.
No need to repeat it, except I've already done it. I've already repeated it. Right, any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll vote by roll call. Mr. Davidson,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye, Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. On to the larger bond reduction.
So this,
Okay, and here we see that the estimate of the remaining work is $1,204,000, which is greater than 20% of the original bond, 20% figure being 877. So this $1.2 million would seem to be the appropriate figure. Any discussion on this? Any motions?
I move that we grant the bond reduction request to withhold a final $1,204,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Davidson.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. The office will take care of any paperwork on this.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. So Fiona will touch base then on the paperwork then.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, our last action item is a temporary certificate of occupancy extension at 130-134 Worcester Street. So bring us up to date on that.
Sure, absolutely. So, right when I had started in Grafton, about a month in, myself and Graves Engineering conducted a site walk of the property to basically confirm condition compliance. At the time, there was a few outstanding items which are in the attached memo, but the consensus came down to, there was a request to have a temporary certificate of occupancy. The building department was aware of that request. Before I brought this to the board, I wanted to confirm that would be, a relatively low risk ask. So when Graves and I went out, we conferred that, yes, indeed, most of the work has been completed to the point where a temporary CO would be relatively low risk and also give the business the opportunity to start selling product and moving financially forward. So the temporary CO came before the board early January 2023, and was the CO temporary was issued through December 31st. So basically, I was double checking the timeline as passed, and now we need to consider a extension of that to finalize some last minute items. And I know that the business owner is here, but I also wanted to just follow up. I had a conversation with the contractor who's Dan Page, and he relayed to me that obviously with the weather, they can't move forward with some of the outstanding items, particularly the plantings and the top course of the binder. So they're looking for an extension through the end of September. But I will let you confirm that that isn't the timeline that works. And
Yeah,
the
the-
board can mull it over.
Correct. There's my name's Alan. Thank you for having me, by the way. Yeah, there's some action items that are still necessary to be done, and part of it is a cost component, and part of it is the actual weather. Sometimes they go hand in hand, in that if we were to, require some company to go out there and do some of that work, for example, on the top coat side of it, we would be looking at a significant cost right now, higher than if we were to wait it during a period of time when it might be a little bit more cost effective for us, and it will allow us to continue generating further revenue. As as everybody here is aware, it took us quite a bit to get there, so we're still kind of digging out of that, even though we've been open for a couple of months now.
All right, so the ask here is for the board to grant an extension of the temporary CO through the end of September.
Yes.
Any questions, comments from the board? Any
Yeah.
thoughts?
Just, I'm interested. I've wondered whether you were actually open or not. You see the lights on, all the different things as I go by, but I haven't happened to see anything out there in the public. Glad to hear that you're open.
We did have a couple of grand opening ceremonies, but we're obviously, it's also limited in what we can actually do there as well, and we want to make sure we're compliant, as well as keeping mindful of the cost.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I'll just add one last comment that I conferred with the building inspector about all of this, and he had no outstanding concerns that he shared either. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Yeah, I think my only comment is I think it makes sense to, at least for me, to say yes to the extension. That said, I'll be very tepid on potentially granting it another extension after this. I don't think I'd be as willing if none of these are changed by then.
Yeah, since it's probably advisable not to attempt plantings right around now.
Not only that, but they're expensive right now.
It's probably also preferable to not try to do a top coat in weather like this,
Correct.
regardless of cost.
Mm-hmm.
These seems like the remaining items generally would in the long run work out better if they were done in more appropriate weather.
Correct.
And if that's really the only thing that's at this point, the main thing that's holding you up is the unsuitability of completing the job right now. Yeah, I mean, I don't see a problem with going through the end of September. Beyond that if we ever get there, that'll be a whole nother story, but I'm not gonna worry. Doesn't sound like anybody's worried about it right now. In which case, perhaps a motion would be in order?
I move that the board grant the extension of a temporary certificate of occupancy through September 30th, 2024.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Davidson.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Best of luck in getting everything really fully up and going. Alrighty, it is not yet 7:30.
Not bad.
Moving right along here. Moving into our discussion items then, our first discussion item is Spring 2024 Town Meeting zoning articles. And yes, the town meeting is rapidly approaching, and
So this is-
within the next very few weeks, we need to line up whatever we want to do in the spring.
Mr. Vice Chair, just a suggestion that because this might warrant conversation that is longer than 15 minutes, because there's a couple of different things that have come up, I'm happy to address this now and start that. But just a suggestion that we may want to consider doing maybe some of the faster general business items, because I do want to talk some specifics about, like the wireless bylaw, and it might,
Yes.
it might take a while.
Yes, I would be comfortable if there's no objection, let's just, defer this discussion until after we're done with the public hearings, or until such time as we have more open-ended time to discuss it.
Sure.
Is there any thought of anything we want to say that might be fairly brief on the mill overlay?
So I basically wanted to get the board's temperature and if we still want to pursue that. I'm assuming it's a yes, but we haven't been able to reconnect with CMRPC since the last time we were researching the issue. Gabe Trevor of CMRPC used some local planning assistant hours to provide a presentation and update the bylaw, which the board just thought that it needed some reworking. I'm happy to re-engage Gabe to try and report back to us with some more information, but I just wanted to, I guess, understand if that's something that we want to try and do for spring or give it more time and attention that it needs until fall. It does seem like it needs quite a bit of work, and without being able to connect with CMRPC on any follow-up, which admittedly, I could have put the pressure on a little bit more. I just think that we might need to give that a little bit more time, but I'm happy to consider.
Yeah, my view on that would be, number one, that this is not a topic I want to try to get done for a Springtown meeting, because I do think it will take a fair amount of work for the board really to nail down what it would like to do. And number two, just to refresh our memories on this, we started out talking about mill redevelopment, and the work that had been done to date was sort of looking at there's kind of two directions that we may want to go, and I think the last time the board talked about it, we kind of got a tentative sense of going in one particular direction, but we probably want to revisit that and really nail down which way we want to go. Just briefly, though, the two directions I'm talking about are, one, we have exactly two traditional historic mill buildings in town, the Wiskonup Mill in South Grafton and Depot Street, and Washington Mills. And we could focus on redevelopment of that style, that particular type of mill building, in which case it's probably best to look at that in the context of village mixed use, because the Wiskonup Mill is in the VMU district, and a lot of the provisions of VMU are sort of oriented at adaptive reuse of buildings. So that we would look at that and kind of in from the point of view of tweaking the village mixed use. We've talked about village mixed use for the New England Village area where Washington Mills is. We haven't pursued it, but that would be an angle to look at. On the other hand, the other major direction would be more generally, and this is kind of part of what Gabe had provided us, it was more generally looking at adaptive reuse of historic buildings in a much broader context, like old historic school buildings, which we really don't have any anymore, historic churches, which we really don't have much of, historic fire stations, but more generally historic buildings. If we want to look at it from that point of view, we're not necessarily looking at creating something like a zoning overlay, because these are scattered all over town.
Right.
So we'd be looking more at defining a new something that we might call adaptive reuse, or something like that, defining that in the use table, defining parameters for what buildings would qualify and for what kinds of reuse we'd want to look at. So there's two rather different zoning approaches we would take depending on how we wanted to look at this topic. And again, it's going to take more than a few minutes of discussion to really wrap our minds around how we want to go on that.
Absolutely, and just to your point, Mr. Vice Chair, that I think when Gabe was involved a few months ago, we really were trying to navigate the second option that you had just described and we were in data gathering mode, and you had presented a list of properties that this could apply to, and Gabe was looking at other communities that had similar bylaws in place that we might be able to look to as case studies. But yeah, I think that we need, as you mentioned, I think we might need to establish what's the preferred avenue to go down before we even start thinking about bringing this to town meeting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but ultimately my concern is that we we do this in a way that makes sense for Grafton. And you know, we can look at other communities for examples, but you know, I want to make sure we're thinking of it in terms of what could work well in Grafton
Right.
for the properties in Grafton to which it might apply.
Right.
And yeah, that's going to take some time. So it's probably enough for tonight, just to sort of as we've just done, kind of refresh our memories on where we were with that and what we want to think of going forward. We want to dedicate some serious time to this.
Yep.
I think that we want to think about best use of our energies. How close are we to really needing this? How, you know, like you were saying, we don't have a whole lot of buildings, and the ones like the mills that we have haven't been showing any signs of anything happening there.
Yep.
So are we fixing something, or are we looking into things that maybe there'd be better use for the time at this stage?
Yep, that's definitely a consideration. That's why I think that's kind of implicitly behind the fact that we really haven't been pushing on this. The topic's been on our radar for several years, and it's not the highest priority in my mind, and I think we kind of all want to, so let's make sure we're kind of on the same page with that. We can sort of keep it on our radar, push it forward a little bit as we see, as we have the desire to do so, but yeah.
Right. My understanding is that this endeavor, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I started back in 2019. We're still trying to 2019, 2020, and we're still kind of working through that, which is totally fine and okay. But it just so folks on the board have a little bit of background about how long this has been going on for a while, and a topic of discussion for some time.
Yep.
I
Yep.
noticed in something back from somewhere along the line with CMRPC about the comment on how complicated our bylaw is, and that's true. We've got an awful lot in it, and I'd like not to make it any bigger than it needs to be. But also, we seem to have an awful lot of energy being expended on all of our activities, and there's a finite amount that you can expect to spend. So I'd say if there's an opportunity or something comes along, then push it forward. But otherwise, just as you said, Fiona.
Yeah, and if I remember right, one of the pushes for this board to start looking at the mill overlay work was at town meeting. Someone on a citizen's petition was looking to redevelop one of the old mills for a particular use that wasn't allowed in that zone, and the town did not approve that use in a town meeting.
Yes, that
Yeah.
was, I think the initial contact with the board for considering a mill redevelopment of some kind preceded that by a little bit, but it sort of, some of those discussions with the owner of that particular mill led to putting the topic on our radar and on their own initiative, trying to get a zoning approval for a particular use.
Yep.
But yeah, it kind of it goes back to that particular mill.
Okay.
But it's probably more than enough discussion for tonight. We won't forget the topic, but it's not at the top of our priority list.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on that topic? If not, it's 7:25. Our last discussion item should be brief. The Open Space and Recreation Committee requested of the planning board a report on the status of all the open space and recreation plan action items that were assigned, for which responsibility was assigned to the planning board. And our town planner has filled out the form and returned it to the Open Space and Rec Committee.
Dave, do you want me to run through these quickly, or?
Is everybody, I mean, you can read it at your leisure. Just for the record, Fiona, I will be lightly editing this particularly so that the status column is consistent with the way the committee reports things, but the substance of this is satisfactory. You know, we've made progress. I think we had, the first one, 1.2C, we had completed that action item last year.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it was completed in 2021. So, as a completed action item, it doesn't, the status for 2023 simply remains completed. There was nothing further on that one.
The first for what?
The first one, the
Okay.
stormwater regulations with subdivision rules.
Okay, because we are doing some.
So we are doing more some work related
Since
to LID, which I think relates to another one of the action items. So, I haven't had a chance actually to review these really closely, but basically, I think by and large the substance of what you put in there is appropriate. And I'll circle back with you just to confirm that, because the status column has to have specific words in order to fit into the status summary table we use, but.
Yeah, we can talk about maybe some of the ones that were completed prior that I got that I misrepresented here.
Yeah, I think
That works.
we only had one completed action item.
Oh well, then okay.
That's really
the
it. I think there's nothing. I don't think I'll have any other substantive changes to recommend. It's sort of just formatting it for consistency.
Okay, sounds good.
But we are making additional progress.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions or comments on this?
All right, I'll stop sharing.
And I thank you for your prompt response. This all goes into the Open Space and Rec Committee's annual report for the annual town report, which is due into the administrator's office on January 31st. I have so far, the committee has so far received 9 responses out of the 12 we're expecting, so it's pretty good,
That is good.
which is, well. Enough said on that topic. It is not quite 7:30 yet. We have some bills to be approved.
Sure.
I move we pay our bills.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we pay the bills. It's always a good thing to pay your bills. Any discussion on the motion?
The bills that were presented tonight.
Yes.
Yes, you're
That's
you're
that's my
not
motion.
making a motion to pay bills that we have not yet received.
Or to pay anyone else's bills.
Or the bills that are on the presented to the board for approval of payment. Be precise about it. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Davidson,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. And not enough, 30 seconds isn't enough time for a staff report. Probably not even enough time. I'll just ask if any of the correspondence caught anybody's eye that they want to talk about.
I'll just say the idea of 87 Milford Road being acquired by the town is interesting. But
Yep.
Yes. The town manager in Upton had reached out to me, trying to get, gauging interest. And I said, I think that it would be just based on the designations, the location, the potential connections to open space. I mean, personally, it seemed like and from a departmental standpoint, it seemed like a good idea. So we received a formal, I I asked the Conservation Commission to put it on their agenda, which they did, and they did make a formal recommendation to the select board to acquire the property. And the property, just to reiterate, it's 87 Milford Road. It's right on the border of the town of Upton, and I believe it's near Lake Wildwood in Upton.
Yep, it's, another way to describe it is it's in between the railroad and the West River.
Yes. Yes.
And it actually does not directly abut anything in Grafton except someone's property adjacent to it, which once upon a time was Barbara and Bud Hazard's property, but no longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Across the railroad tracks, there is a small privately owned piece, and then behind that, there is the Milford Road property that the town had acquired for potential future use, not dedicated to open space.
Mm-hmm.
But still in all, the fact that this property abuts the West River and the property that Upton is interested in preserving makes it reasonably attractive.
Right.
Yet to be worked out are the details of how, because this is sort of undertaken jointly with Upton, and details of how that might play out are yet to be determined.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where we've landed. We got far enough that we, agreed that we think it's a good idea. And now it's kind of the select board will need to determine what their thoughts, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, we're hopeful that this will move forward in a positive direction. And yeah, as you say, the parcel is landlocked, so it's great open space potential.
Do we want to let the selectmen know that we feel that way too?
I think if someone on the board would care to make a motion,
So move.
Should that be on our agenda first, though,
As an action item.
rather than
this
just being
is
in the
just this
correspondence?
discussion on correspondence, but
We do it at the next meeting.
to be more formal about it, why don't we take an action item for our next, I think you get a sense from the board that the board is supportive of the idea. Let's formalize that as an action item at the next meeting. There doesn't seem to be any real time pressure on this, except that Joe and company on the Upton side would like to get something nailed down.
Right.
Informally, there's a sense that this board would approve it,
Okay. Yeah, I will
Would
work
support
on
it,
Recommend it.
recommend it,
yes.
support it, be in favor of it. I mean, we don't have the power to actually approve a purchase or anything.
Anyway,
that. Okay.
Alrighty. It is now just past 7:30, which means we can work on our public hearings. The first public hearing scheduled for this evening is request for special permit, SB 2023-13/SPA, and site plan approval, 20 Indian Path, submitted by Dish Wireless, for which the board has received a request to continue the hearing to the next meeting, February, whatever the date is.
I move that the board grant the applicant's written request to continue the hearing until Monday, February 12th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Davidson.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. Our next public hearing is the continuation of the hearing, request for special permit SP 2023-05/SPA and site plan approval at 58 Follette Street. Note about the board members in attendance, Fiona?
Yes. Yes. So, just wanted to bring up before we start that, and Natalia, please jump in if I am misrepresenting this. You're more of the keeper of the keys administratively than with the attendance, but we are missing a planning board member this evening. We only have 4 members in attendance. We found out, right before the meeting. Otherwise, I would have given more of a heads up. However, it is enough to close the hearing, and it probably wouldn't. It's up to the board and the applicant about the decision. A draft decision is prepared, but the missing member can fill in a Mullen certificate for this hearing and get caught up and be a voting member by the next time. So that's where we're at, unfortunately, this evening.
Yes, the
Yeah, but I
board
think,
could vote on the decision if we close and want to do the decision, but we would need all four members of the board to vote yes to approve it if we're to do that
Correct.
tonight.
yes, I think the issue here is we can take testimony and discuss things at the public hearing, and it's at the risk of repeating everything. If we vote tonight on the draft, on the decision, we need to get all four of us to vote in favor of it. If we defer a vote to the next meeting when all five of us are present, then
You'll have 5.
one person can vote the opposite of the other four, and there, a 4-1 would still be an approval. So it's a question of depending on the unanimity of the four of us tonight, or deferring to the next meeting for the board to complete action on the decision.
Right.
Which means we still could close the hearing tonight,
Yep.
or we could leave it open either way. So,
I wonder if the applicant has any input.
I was just looking to the applicant for their input on that.
Thank you. Michael Jimo representing Selco Partnership, so thank you for that. The whole reason we're here is because we were trying to get a 5-person voting quorum. If you remember, we reapplied for that reason. I would prefer
Yes.
to have a 5-person voting quorum. I think the hearing is ready to be closed. If it's closed, it doesn't matter. You could still discuss the decision without your 5th member being here,
Yeah.
and he could vote at a later time.
Correct.
You also said that he's eligible for the Mullen,
Right. You can Mullen
certificate.
and
so he's been to every one of the substantive
yes, we
sessions. I was
confirmed.
trying to figure that out. Okay,
Yeah, we confirmed that he has, and this would be the only meeting that he's missed.
yeah. I mean, that's fine to proceed then, as long as you refrain from voting. I would prefer you would do that anyway.
So,
Everybody comfortable with that on the board, that we can engage in whatever discussions we feel we need to engage in tonight as part of the public hearing? If we could even go so far as to conclude that we've heard all we need to hear, and close the hearing. Up to you, up to everybody.
I'm in favor of that approach.
All right, so to begin with then, just sort of refresh our memories on where we're at with everything and what has transpired in between the previous session of the public hearing and tonight.
yes, so I'll briefly just give an update. So since the last hearing, testimony was received from council that basically has narrowed down the discussion to A, determining if there is a substantial gap in coverage, and B, if 21 Follett is a feasible and viable alternate site. So since that time, and I'm not going to rehash this entire thing because it is long and it's part of the record and viewable for everybody. But I had reached out to several different groups, including, but not limited to, the select board, the Grafton Water District Board of Water Commissioners, the conservation agent, the Mass DEP, and I also talked to a representative in Boston who is an expert on Article 97. And all of that information is summarized in the letter, Exhibit 52, that was uploaded. Mr. Vice Chair, if it's amenable to you and the board, I'm happy to answer specific questions about that memo or talk in more depth about any particular aspect of it, but I don't think it would be good use of time for me to rehash everything. But basically, one of the biggest points that I do want to underscore is, since the last hearing of the planning board, one of the main takeaways was that we need to address the select board and confirm if they would support an RFP on the site of 21 Follett Street for a cell tower. They met on January, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the date. It is in my memo. They met in January twice, but
The 9th and the 16th.
thank you. Yes, they met on the 9th. They wanted to, a couple of members wanted to gather some more information to understand the site of 21 Follett Street better. I conducted a site visit with two members of the select board, and answered clarifying questions for them on site on Friday the 12th. On January the 16th, they voted they voted 4-1 to not support issuing an RFP at the site of 21 Follett Street due to all of the information that's in the record, testimony during the hearing. That was their final vote. And then the Board of Water Commissioners, I should just highlight that they did state that they would not be supporting an application like this in the area of their jurisdiction at 21 Follett Street, which is the wellhead and the solar array. They did say in their letter, which is also uploaded to the record, that outside of that, those areas, they would be fine with that as long as the tower wouldn't have the potential to affect their infrastructure, which would, if it fell or something. 21 Follett Street is like 50 plus acre parcel. So, but as we mentioned, and I won't go back into it, there's some site constraints there, and the most buildable portions are built upon for the most part. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything specific. It's in the letter or otherwise, but then I think the applicant should probably have the opportunity to speak as well.
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Fiona, for an extremely thorough job in documenting all these, the site constraints and the procedures that might have to be undertaken to work around them. It's way more than I would have done or would have had the time to do or inclination to do. But yeah, thank you very much for a very thorough coverage of the topic. And I just, as sort of a comment on that, and then even why we had to do that, is the site, as determined by the select board, is not currently available to the applicant as an alternative site. Mm-hmm. Normally, the board would not undertake any sort of evaluation of a site whose owner declined to make it available to the applicant. This is an unusual case because the site once was offered to the applicant. The applicant chose not to take advantage of that offer, mm-hmm. and so, thus we've rather thoroughly documented the difficulties that the applicant might have encountered should they have chosen to try to pursue that site. So part of what I want to make sure we end up with is, number one, we recognize that the site is not currently available. Number two, I think we need to take into account we need to answer the question of, was the applicant's rejection of the site back in the day reasonable? In other words, and I'm not saying, not even suggesting that in this particular case this happened or might have happened, but hypothetically, if an applicant chooses not to use a site that's actually better from all the perspective of the zoning bylaw, that could be viewed as unjustifiable. I don't see that as being this case, but it's good that our decision, that in our decision we will be covering the details of the characteristics of this site that influence the applicant to not choose the site and not choose that as a viable alternative. So,
I don't have anything to add since the last time. I think Fiona did a very thorough job. I will say, I think Mr. Robbins, you put something in front of the selectmen, your own investigation. I saw it in the select board package, and if possible, I think that should be part of the record here as a separate analysis of the viability of that site.
Yes, and for those who hadn't seen that, what I did, and I did this for my own purposes, to try to visualize in my mind what the various site constraints would do to, or how much of the site could be developed while honoring all those constraints. The constraints being the setback from the property line, the tower setback from the property line, the tower setback from zone 1, the setback from the solar array, the wetlands, and the flood zones. And put together kind of progression of maps showing that what each of these constraints do to take away the available land available for development. And under the parameters I used for that, there ends up being virtually nowhere on that site where you could put a tower. Now you could dig in a lot deeper and think of, well, what if the board reduces those setbacks? What if this, what if that? Different tower heights. And there's a lot of variables you can put into that would make some land a little bit more, some areas a little bit more available. But unless we want to go into all that, that was sort of a simple illustration of, without modifying the constraints, this is where you end up having available space to build it in. If you would like that in the record, anybody in the board, would the board want to take a look at that before deciding whether to include that in the record?
I just given it right now, and I think it makes sense to be in the record.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I saw it in the select board meeting.
Okay.
I thought it was a very logical way to lay that out. We had given you a map that had a lot more on it, but it was
Yeah.
one map, and this
Yes,
was an easier.
This is what got me started in there. When I looked at your map and all the lines on there, I thought, well, can I visualize the end result of all the constraints? And I didn't even have to include some of the constraints that would affect an actual project on that.
Yeah, I don't, there's been no other further developments since the last time. We do have some minor comments on the draft decision, but that's not something that we would need to address in the hearing, I don't think. Unless you have a rule about that, but typically you close the hearing and then discuss the draft decision, I believe.
Yeah, or more often than not, we discuss the draft decision after the hearing is closed, and the applicant is typically given the opportunity to comment on the draft decision. And most of the time, the applicant does provide us with some valuable feedback on the decision. Like, oh, we chose the wrong words, or we didn't, well, whatever. I'm not gonna belabor that point.
So, yes, we can do that. It's,
They said with,
I don't have any other developments either. I was just elaborating on that.
so if there is nothing else that needs to go on the record, Natalia has her hand up.
I just wanted to let you know, because I just got an email from David Maxim that he is signed on if you need him for anything.
What?
I just got an email from David Maxim that he is signed on if you
There
need
he
him
is.
for anything.
I don't have any questions from Mr. Maxon from my analysis personally, but
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Maxon?
I appreciate him being here, but I think we're good.
Yeah, if not, thank you for David for signing in and being available just in case we did have any questions. So as I understand it right now, we're going to add to the record the map that I presented to the select board last week.
Yep.
And we likely will be adding to the record a Mullen certificate from Mr. Veckatraman.
yes.
Yep. As I recall, Mullins certificates are included, sometimes they're included after the hearing's closed. I'm not sure about that. I seem to remember.
Well,
Do we need to
Talia
keep
might
the
be able
record
to
open?
confirm that one.
Do we need to keep the record open for for a Mullins certificate?
Natalia, do you know off the top of your head if we need to do that?
Technically, we haven't sometimes. It might be good just to have it in the record.
I mean,
Well,
we
whether
always have,
we-
yeah, it does have to be included in the draft
Yeah.
decision, in the list of exhibits.
Right.
But back in the day, we at least used to close the hearing with an understanding or a statement about that sort of a inclusion of information that was to be forthcoming.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think you can.
You'd
close
think
the
I'd remember after all these years, but
I think
don't.
as long as we've stated in the record that we expect to get it, I think we're okay to close the hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, otherwise you could get into a situation where you can't get to there from here, because someone isn't here and someone's not there in the last, like we have right now.
No other testimony to be
So if there's nothing else that needs to go on the record,
Do we want to give the public one last chance before we close the hearing?
well, seeing as how this is a public hearing,
Yes.
that would be appropriate. Before we take a motion to close the public hearing, this will be our last chance for the public to comment on this project. So I will now open the floor to public comment from anybody in the room or anybody on Zoom. Seeing none,
All right. I move that we close the public hearing with the expected exhibits to be added as discussed.
Second.
Okay.
moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Davidson,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Wood?
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously, and as previously discussed, this hearing is closed, and as previously discussed, we will not be, do you want to talk about the decision at all, or would it be better to defer discussion of the decision entirely until the next meeting? Any preference?
No, I don't have a preference, but I think it probably would be cleaner and easier to discuss it at the next meeting. But it's up to the board. I mean,
Yep.
there's no, we need to give the probably a chance to be able to follow.
Bob?
You had, there was one thing in there where there were 2 or 3 options that you offered as to how to handle the objection, about the conservation restriction or whatever it's, I can't, whatever you call it. And one of the things was work out different language that was in between. Do you know what I mean?
Is a condition, Bob?
It's a chapter 61, I believe he's talking
Are
about.
you talking about the chapter 61 issue?
61, yeah,
Okay.
the
Yeah, that's,
yeah.
okay.
If it might be good to at least say, yeah, I think maybe work up language for the next time, so we're not starting from zero next time when we get to that. So we're fairly close to being able to vote. I think most of the questions are covered.
I can reach out to you with the few minor things we've got. If that would be helpful before the next.
Yeah, that would be good, and then we can discuss.
Yeah, I think the one Bob was referring to was C28.
I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, there was,
Screen, sorry, I meant to share it. And I forgot.
it was, yeah, just take a quick look at that.
That's it.
Yes. Yep. So there was, I think we had discussed this earlier in the process about and had kind of gone back and forth with it, but ended up that there, the board is unable to mandate this. I think that this was just a leftover from the prior iterations of the draft, and I think it's. I should have probably just removed it, but I also wanted to make note of the comments that were received by the applicant. Just be as transparent as possible.
My only comment worth mentioning for today is I don't know if we need to have some finding to just mention that there was a typo with regard to Southfield Court.
Okay.
I don't know if we need to like actually call that out in the findings, considering there's exhibits that say the different street name. That's leave it to staff to figure out. And if you have any thoughts to
Well,
to that.
the map was accurate and the road was named incorrectly, so I
Yeah.
pointed that out,
Yeah.
but
My
I-
pedantic
I wondered-
science, just keep.
I wondered if it shouldn't avoid CT and spell out court, because otherwise that might be a place in Connecticut.
True.
Yes, you can see this all the way from Daffodil, Connecticut.
Boy, now there's a,
All right, anything else on the draft decision? Well, we'll all have time to review this before the next meeting. Come prepared to deliberate this until we're blue in the face and finally vote on it.
Yes, it's a 33 pager, so we need some time.
It's,
I
it's-
think.
It's somewhat unusual, but as I noted before, there's a substantial discussion of a site that's not actually available to the applicant, but the discussion helps to understand why it's not and why it is appropriate to think that it's not,
particularly given
given the history.
the input that we received from
Yes.
the
And
public.
all the public input we received.
Okay.
All right, so with that,
Continue.
we'll pick this up at the next meeting as an action item,
Anyways, yeah.
will that be the 9th,
That would be
February 12th.
12th.
February 12th? Okay.
Yep.
I don't know where I got the 9th from.
Yep, and we'll be able to take this up
Oh,
before 7:30 because we put it as
Oh,
an action.
okay,
yes,
So-
great,
wait,
thank you.
right at 7.
All right, thank you.
Yep, we'll start at 7, and if we need to interrupt the deliberation for a public hearing, we'll do that, but I'm not gonna try to predict how long the discussion on the draft decision will take.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in a
Thank
couple
you.
of weeks.
See you then.
Fiona, I am going to have a question I want to route through you on something about the voting in this. So
Okay,
don't be surprised if I manage to email you or
okay.
whatever.
Right. So, thank you, everybody, for attending and participating.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, we seem to have a continuation of a public hearing for a request for a special permit, SB 2023-10/SPA, and site plan approval at 7 Main Street. Mike? As I recall, there were some loose ends from the last time we had discussed this, and loose ends related to a change of engineers on the job. And I gather, I mean, if you want to bring us up to date, have all the loose ends been tied up at this point?
Yes. The short answer is yes. So we worked with the engineering team. I had some outstanding concerns, which I submitted into the record, and I conferred with Graves Engineering and with the applicant's engineer, and we were able to address everything. And if we couldn't address it in this immediate, time frame, we can condition it accordingly. So there was nothing, and Graves submitted a peer review report confirming that all of their concerns were addressed. I think my kind of biggest things that I tried to relay to HSNT was that, some of the architectural needs that go into the BMU will have to be, looked at when building permit time comes around. But we weren't able to, we wouldn't want to hold up. We know that All Phase Glass rather is trying to get up and running and move forward. So yes, long story short, staff have no outstanding concerns. I double checked with fire, everything is good. Graves has no outstanding concerns, and I drafted a decision, which I uploaded into the record. So I don't know if the board, wants to, go through that this evening, or how we wanna proceed, but.
Well, if everything that needs to be on the record is on the record, then we're still in an open public hearing at this point. Does the board have anything to bring up in the context of the public hearing? Natalia has her hand up.
Okay, just in case you want to still have Prabhu participate in the decision, if it's not tonight, we might want to include the Mullen in the exhibits.
Yeah, I mean, so Mike, just so you're aware, so there's, out of the 5 members of the board, 1 person is missing, so you need 4 out of 5 votes for a decision to move forward.
Yep.
There is, this.
Roll the dice. Let's do it tonight.
Yeah,
do it tonight.
okay, I
Roll
was
the
gonna
dice.
say,
Mike is just looking for an opportunity to put this off even longer, right?
Yeah. You know, we haven't invested enough into this, but no, all kidding aside. I think all the T's have been crossed, all the I's have been dotted, and for the love of God, I can't see any reason why anybody would object, but if there's any questions, bring them on. I'm ready for you, to answer them.
I think we can do it tonight.
Sweet.
Natalia's hand is up again.
Sorry. I believe that Andrea might have been present for all of it. She could probably tell us that she could be invoked to vote too, if you wanted to.
This was started.
I don't believe
around a while.
at the beginning Andrea had been appointed yet, Natalia.
I think you're right. Yeah, that would be Mullen. And again, if she wasn't appointed, then that doesn't really work
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking though, Natalia. Appreciate it. But yeah, no, I think we should proceed with the 4 members, just to be on the safe side.
Yes, I think if I understand the record here right, the public hearing began on September 11th or thereabouts.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so we have four members here tonight who will be eligible to vote on the draft decision. Do we have any public comment? I don't see any. Are there any hands up on Zoom?
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second,
Moved and seconded that the board close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Davidson.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. The public hearing is closed. On to the draft decision.
Okay.
Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read through the draft decision. I read through it and didn't see anything that I would suggest changing. But that's just me.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
In advance. Let me just make sure.
We do have something that says the applicant needs to confirm that was marked on waiver for the crosswalks.
Let me. This is why PDF is hard sometimes. 6 loading spaces. I just wanted to double check with. I thought Leslie was going to be here this evening, so when I spoke to her earlier, I'm 99% sure that it's 6 loading spaces based on the site plan, but I just wanted her to definitely just.
Yeah, it's either, it might get knocked down to 5
Okay.
overhead doors. It's not going to exceed 6. Definitely not going to exceed it.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to confirm
Yeah,
the number.
1000%, yeah.
Okay. So, if the board, I have a couple of comments that I just wanted to elaborate on before we proceed and just make sure that the applicant is aware. So, obviously, Leslie and I have been going, Justin T rather, and I've been going back and forth with some of the requirements that are in this zoning district. So, a couple of minor things, the building entrances not being oriented toward the street. I mean, the nature of the building calls for, they're front facing each other. So I included a finding and just attempted to address this in the conditions for when you're going toward getting a building permit, like including, a door that's facing the street.
To run parallel with the street, you're saying, facing the street?
Yeah, like facing, like one primary entrance that runs
One door's not gonna hurt us at this point.
Okay, yeah, I
All
just
it's
want to
gonna
make sure that
take- Yeah,
that's
not a problem.
not gonna be,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Not a problem.
That is one of the design standards and requirements in the village mixed-use district.
But we can still have one in the parking lot facing the, okay,
Yeah.
as long as there's
We
one
just-
there,
We just say that the primary entrance should be facing the street.
consider it done, not a problem.
Okay,
not a
okay,
problem.
great, well,
Yep.
thank you, yeah, that's great, all right,
It's-
and then, yep. So I just included, so I was going through and, you know, double, triple, quadruple checking everything, and, there was just some language that, in the VMU bylaw that I want, this is kind of more for the board, it's not really, not a crazy change or anything like that. It's just there's some specs about pedestrian like crossings that didn't like that said it was waiverable. So I just to be comprehensive and make sure that we're very clear that the applicant is not doing that particular thing. It's not.
That's a good cross of the T, I think.
Yeah, it's just to be extra careful. I mean, it's not. This is for the pedestrian crossings for the fulfilling this section. It's not something that you have to do. It's just a waiverable thing. So I just included it as a waiver.
Okay.
So
Yeah, just sort of a general comment on this is projects in the village mixed-use district face a sort of a different set of standards than most projects. In the village mixed-use district, the standards are by and large designed around some visual and layout concepts that don't always fit perfectly with what we have on the ground there, and they're really oriented more towards a mix of commercial and residential uses, and this particular use is it's not really an ideal fit with the general concept of what the VMU does, but VMU is also intended to be pretty flexible, so some of the requirements there don't really seem to apply to a case like yours.
Yep.
But this is the first project of its nature that we've reviewed in the village mixed-use district. So we're all kind of learning this as we go along.
and we were able
Together we'll get it.
yeah, we were able to iron out like all of those, you know, those specifications, and they're all accounted for in this. So
Perfect.
we're
Yep.
good. And so my last comment was just another confirmation that it was 6 loading spaces. So if the board doesn't have any specific questions about the draft, that's all the comments that I had.
I'll move that the board finds favorably on all findings, grants all waivers, and finds and approves the decision.
Second.
Grants the permit with all the
Yes.
decisions as drafted, as subject to any changes that were discussed tonight.
Exactly.
We always have to make it a little bit more complicated. All right, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Davidson.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously by the required vote of 4 in favor. Now the next step in the paperwork.
Yeah, the fun begins now, yeah, but,
Yes.
you know, I just want to take this time to say thank you all for your patience. You know, with this whole project, as you said, it's a new first-time situation. I also feel obligated and, personally from the heart, I say, I apologize for especially you, Fiona, for, as you and I have spoke several times one-on-one, what I feel is unnecessary turmoil, chaos, lack
No
of
apologies
communications.
necessary.
I'm glad we were all
Fine.
able to come together and accomplish this, so thank you so much. And again,
Congrats.
Fiona, especially yourself and your staff, I appreciate y'all, so,
Thank you. Thank
Alright.
you.
Now comes the
it's probably
20-day
tough.
appeal period.
yeah.
This probably took longer than any of us anticipated it would, but between changes in personnel, the holidays, you can never get anything done over the holidays.
No,
Yeah.
no. And the biggest thing I feel, you know, especially, to the gentleman that's not here, you know, last week, at the last meeting, I felt he was stepped on, by the staff in which I had hired, well, prior to them. And I do apologize for all of that stuff, so.
Yeah, we got it
together,
done.
We got it. We're moving forward. I'm gonna get the hell out of here before I say something wrong. Thank you all.
Just Mike, just so you know now, I'll get this finalized and sent over to the clerks and the 20-day appeal process starts. So that's.
We're breaking ground tomorrow. I'm not waiting for it.
I was gonna.
Just kidding.
A little bit more of a waiting
You,
period.
you can break ground at your own risk.
I know. Thank you again. God bless.
Alrighty,
Thank
I'll
you.
be in touch.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alrighty, that completes our public hearings. And I believe we can now circle back to the discussion of the spring 24 zoning articles.
Yes, so I wanted to discuss with the board, so we're obviously, town meeting is coming and we want to start kind of having this discussion about what zoning changes we'd like to see. So there's a couple of minor things that I personally need to address. But, for example, like the Department of Housing and Community Development is no longer DHCD, and there's a couple of places in the bylaw that needs to be updated to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, like those kinds of like minor, like kind of granular things. I'll go through that first, and if anybody has any objections, we're happy to talk through it, but these are all kind of smaller scale. So the agricultural zone is sometimes interchangeably, folks in the GIS system uses R80. So I find it very confusing. So for consistency's sake, I'm going to, or I will hope that we can, just include in parentheses where applicable any references to the agricultural zone, parentheses R80, because we've had people who have approached us and said, oh, well, GIS is saying that I'm in the R80 zone, and I think there's old references from prior bylaws. So just so we're all clear, R80 is agricultural. We will need to include a definition for seasonal. That is a priority of ours, that we have the bylaw
For the outdoor dining?
not for the outdoor dining specifically, our bylaw that was passed for the accessory use to allow for banquet facilities, alcohol sales, etc. If it's accessory use to a primary agricultural use, but we don't define seasonal specifically. So the board will need to, I need to do I have started doing some independent research about how other bylaws are addressing this. Some bylaws do it by like month time frames. Some do not. The kind of typical seasonal thought process is Memorial Day to Labor Day. And I think that we do need to probably talk through this, and I need to present some concrete examples before we can make any final decisions. But I just wanted that to be on our radar as a definition will need to be added. Just to be clear going forward. So, okay. Speaking of the VMU, I think we might want to consider allowing provisions for waivers in certain sections, as we've seen through the most recent activity in the area. There's not a lot of and I think this is intentional, so feel free to push back on this, but I think there's not a lot of ability to waive some of the more stringent requirements in the BMU, and I think that for depending on who the applicant is or whatever, some of those standards might be hard and financially challenging to meet. Some of those architectural, very kind of specific details. So again, we don't need to rip apart the bylaw now, but for example, our wireless bylaw has the ability to waive requirements. Maybe something to consider for VMU. But then again, the bylaw was drafted for a reason, right? We're trying to cultivate an image, so I don't
Yeah,
want
well,
to.
that
There
gets,
is
gets
that.
me back to,
Minor detail.
what I've off and on looked at the VMU and tried to figure out what does it really, what does some of it really mean, and how well does it actually fit with Grafton? There's a piece of the VMU that talks about roads, and it has categories of roads that are nowhere defined. So there's probably several areas of the VMU that are worth revisiting to maybe clarify. I've accumulated a bunch of notes over the years, and I should go through those. But some of what I think I might want to look at in the VMU is probably more than we can accomplish for May of this year. But something like the sort of the general ability to waive certain provisions, at least, that kind of stands alone as something that is worth looking at. I mean, we're beginning to get more experience actually using the VMU,
Right.
and so based on that experience, I've been expecting that we would likely want to refine it based on our experience actually applying it. So
Right.
This is one example.
Right, as we're like actively employing it, but I just want to be cognizant of the fact that like the waiver provisions, or very limited waiver provisions, were included when the bylaw was initially drafted, and I'm sure that there's a reason for it, and that area.
It's because that's what the consultant gave us.
The consultant wanted to use form-based code. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that that's probably a good place, if the board is in agreement, a good place to start, and then I can start thinking about how that language would fit in. I'm thinking of mirroring to an extent how we address it in the wireless bylaw, because it's just kind of like one section added where it's kind of more general like language, and we're not having to change a bunch of different sections in the bylaw basically. So I will work on that.
I have a question too. So typically when we see things put out to the public about the BMU, it's really nice, like you said, it's those nice decorative pictures of the mixed use with the residential. So it seems if we want to put in things like we just passed, we should show other pictures too, and give them what it could end up looking like. It's not the cottage, it's both. You're voting in both things when you do that, and I think we can be more transparent about what we're actually doing, rather than coming back later and we all of a sudden have this beautiful, mixed use with nothing that we pictured in the beginning.
Right. And that's exactly like what we want to avoid. We want to capture that like character and make it look nice. I see Bob's hand is up.
Bob.
I just my basic feeling is that I want to be cautious about getting too much waiver ability. The rules should be the rules, so anyway, I'll be cautious as we go into that. It puts the board, it shifts where the board is in the town.
Yeah, you go too far in that direction, and the board ends up becoming the zoning bylaw is whatever we decide it is for a particular project.
Exactly.
Right.
We don't want to go
Yeah.
there.
Right. Exactly.
I don't. Historically, there have been situations that other boards maybe went further than they really should have with that sort of thing way back. So I like the idea that we have rules and everybody knows what the rules are. But it was my idea to put the waiver in the cell tower because we didn't know enough, I think, at the time to write an absolutely perfect bylaw. We couldn't anticipate the range of things that would come along.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We do have a member of the public having their hand up. Does the board want to take any public comment in this discussion? No
Early.
objection. Let's enable that member of the public to speak, and we'd like to first ask you to identify yourself and then say your piece.
Can you guys see me? This is Leslie Wilson from HST. I was supposed to be on the last hearing. I was on the phone the entire time, and apparently you guys couldn't hear me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Leslie. We didn't. Yeah, we already have closed that hearing and voted on the
No,
decision.
I know, and Mike is going to freak out now because he thinks that I wasn't on the hearing. But I just want you to know that I was online at 7 o'clock. I was there for the entire hearing.
Okay, I will let him
And-
know.
Yeah, we'll let Mike.
I
know.
will send him a note this evening and let him know that you were on and we couldn't hear you or see.
I tried like calling and recalling and I couldn't get through. And I didn't know you guys couldn't hear me because we were last on the list. So I so I just assumed I could unmute myself at the end and you'd be able to hear me, and no one could hear me, and then, I could hear everything he said. And, I heard everything he said, basically. That
Okay.
I'm not going to say anything else before I say something that I regret.
All right, I will let him know that you were on, and I apologize for for the tech issues.
Because it wasn't on my end. Because I was online, I could see the whole hearing. I can read you all the notes from all the other projects.
All right, thank you, Leslie. I'll let him know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Back to the zone. Anything else you want to discuss right for the moment on the VMU?
I just wanted to make one quick point that maybe one of the things that the board might want to consider instead of kind of general waivers and that type of thing, like a general waiver provision like in the wireless bylaw that we were talking about, something that where we kind of focus more of those specific elements on the mixed use and residential types of properties, because that really is makes a lot more sense than for a fabrication / flex building to have to adhere to. Not saying we should. It's up to the board, but I've noticed in the way that the bylaw is written, it does impose a lot more stringent design criteria, etc., for specifically residential and mixed use properties, and I think that that's the intention. So that's another way that we could kind of employ, and get, not significantly change the bylaw or its purpose, but also understand that we need a little bit more flexibility for some of these manufacturing type of uses that don't necessarily.
But when they build next door to them and they're having to do all the facades in front, then, why do they have to hold to that standard if the other folks didn't have to? So it just,
Right.
yeah, it's hard to say you can parse it out like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I'm not the town planner, but I'm just
Yeah, I know,
thinking
and
about it from their perspective too.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that comment. And I think that was one of the hardest things about this app. This most recent application is really, enforcing. Hey, got to do it either now or at the building permit stage, which is what we ended up doing, because a lot of the architectural drawings would be submitted later. But anyway, I don't want to go too much on one example, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just something that the board should think about if we even want to open that can of worms. Just something that I noticed. So
Yeah, I mean, there's some food for thought here, and we can pursue some of these thoughts whether we can come up with something that we think could be workable in time for the May town meeting, that's a whole other question.
Right.
You know, and you know, here again, there's not a super sense of urgency to do anything along these lines. It's just that, you know, our experience with this particular VMU project raises some questions and some thoughts.
Yeah. It's challenging because like sometimes you have to see these things play out in real time, and then you're like, oh, we should address this at town meeting. It's like, oh well, probably not enough time to conduct like a significant, research analysis effort. But in any event, so that's where I'm at with that. And I'll draft a couple of examples of potential options for the board, and then we can talk through them. And if we like them, good. If we don't, then we'll deal with it later, or not at all. So something else that I wanted to talk through, and I will, two more things, sorry. So I've been approached by a local business owner about allowing, convenient MD type of uses, like urgent care, like treatment center, or not treatment centers, rather, like in urgent care inpatient facilities, in the VMU. And I've spoken to the building inspector about this and floated the idea with the town administrator's office. This particular business owner is coming before department head staff to talk through this a little bit more. Grafton does not have I'm just going to use convenient MD because it's coming to the top of my head, but a convenient MD type of use. I know there's a Minute Clinic that's operating as an accessory use to the CVS, but it's not the same, and doesn't offer the same types of services. So it's, obviously it would need to be subject to, at the very, very minimum site plan review, but, I just wanted the board to be aware that, a local business owner is highly interested in pursuing that type of use in a property that he owns, particularly in the VMU Worcester Street, VMUWS.
Yeah, Worcester Street.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got
Colloquially,
it's on TV.
colloquially, I can't even pronounce that word. Locally known as the Bolak Plaza.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So, I think that we need to get a little bit more feedback from staff about this one, but that is coming up on Thursday, and I want the board to just be aware that a conversation is happening. And last but not least, our wireless bylaw. So I asked Dave Maxon I sent an email to Dave Maxon because of all the wireless activity that we have going on. I think everyone on the board is aware that we need to make some adjustments. At the very least, we need to include changes to the allowable antenna height so the applicants aren't constantly asking for waiver requests from the 5-foot height limit. As we've seen from David Maxon, testimony that he submitted as part of applications, it's not aligning with industry standards and best practices. So at the very least, I would like to address that. I think we also should consider addressing the eligible facilities requests language. We don't have anything specifically in the bylaw that speaks to eligible facilities requests per the 2012 act that we've that's been referenced in the past. And lastly, something to consider is requiring special permits for co-locations versus having them as determinations of minor modifications. David Maxon submitted some information and has offered to provide a markup of the bylaw with comments and suggestions. I didn't take him up on that because I wasn't sure how to go about compensating him for his time because Natalia and I will need to figure out if we have some money in the budget for consultant fees to cover that, because I think he's obviously the expert and he's worked on a lot of bylaws across the Commonwealth in different towns. So that's I'm hoping at the very least the antenna height should be adjusted, and I'm sure that Bob has some questions and thoughts about this.
I forget, does
Wow,
the planning board
he
have
doesn't.
That covers some of the items on my list for the wireless zoning.
Oh, okay,
changes.
yeah, you have, yeah, I'm, because, again, I can't underscore enough how much of an expert I am not in this topic, so if I'm missing something, I've just been picking up, observational data from when we're navigating through these hearing processes and trying to put it together myself, but yeah, the
So
experts should weigh in.
I forget, does the planning board have any board designated discretionary funds in a year that the board could vote to spend towards something? I don't think we do necessarily, but I don't remember for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the board per se does. The department has,
Yeah, I know the
planning department has funds for contractors and consultants.
Yeah, we definitely do have a consultant and technical services line item. I just don't know confidently off the top of my head how much is left in that.
Yep.
But I think it would be, I would need to get a price quote from David Maxon and
Yeah.
figure that out, but I think that he should definitely weigh in.
Yeah.
If he's used to doing this type of thing for communities throughout the
Yeah.
Commonwealth, he's gonna know.
I would love his input if we can
Yeah,
manage it.
and I think, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I'm in the middle of you. It just occurred to me, we're right in budget forming time, aren't we? Town budget, and this would be the exact time probably to be talking to Evan if we wanted to have something going forward. Consider putting something in. I don't know how he'd feel about that, but for next year.
Are you saying for the board to have funds that we
Well,
could designate?
that was the question. And probably Evan can cover the base, like the money that's in the planning department gets the job done.
Yeah,
Whatever. Anyway, it's budget times. This is the time, if you're thinking of it, to think of it.
I am 90. Natalia, cut me off if I'm saying something insane, but I'm fairly confident that we would be able to, obviously depending on what the quote would be. I can't imagine that it would be anything that planning department couldn't handle in the budget right now. Because there's a couple of line items this would be applicable to, so.
But what I'm saying is, going forward, we'll probably have these in the future. So we got to think about it.
Okay, right. I did request an increase for that line item. All of them. Okay. So I'll work with Dave Maxon and get a quote, because if he's off, he's already offered, so I will try and get on that, because that would be my top priority.
I think his input to this would be very valuable.
Yep.
Some of the items on my list I got from listening to him.
Yeah, me too. All of mine. So, okay. So I will connect with him, and try and get something moving expeditiously for a town meeting. And I will also look into options for the VMU in terms of waivers. And if we decide we don't want to pursue it, totally fine. I will report back to the board at the next meeting about how the, inpatient clinic / urgent care conversation goes, and I will just kind of work on getting some examples of seasonal from other communities, and then we can talk about that.
Sounds like a plan, yeah. The only thing I wrote down on my list of potential zoning items for me was the wireless.
Yeah, I think the
That's sort of
wireless is going to be the big one. Yeah.
Stuck in my mind as being the one thing that I saw as being relatively important
Yes.
out of all the things. I've got a list of other things that ought to be done at some point.
Yes.
By
Yes. I think we have to take them in chunks. Try and do one at a time. Can get a lot. So that's basically where I'm at. there was a conversation, I had with CMRPC about options for mixed use development, but I think that needs to be explored a lot more before we could talk through, bringing it to town meeting. Like exploring options, especially with the MBTA communities law that was passed, and how we can work through kind of incentivizing mixed use development. So I won't drone on too much about that, because that needs to be studied more. And we actually just received a DLTA, District Local Technical Assistance funding, to do just that. So that's was kind of my method to the madness with that one. Wait and see, and study it a little bit more. And that's all I have.
Anything else anybody has in possible zoning bylaw work for me? Not too early to be, not too early to begin thinking about what we might want to do in October for zoning,
Right.
but right now the focus would be on me. We've got maybe a month to get everything lined up for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's more than enough to try to accomplish in the
Just
time
at the
that-
back of your mind, what else do you want to do in the zoning bylaw? Alrighty. Let's see, that gets us all the way to the next item of business would be staff report.
So, if I haven't driven you crazy with rambling on and on yet, I do have my printout. I think one of the biggest things that I'd like to announce is we have a business owners forum going on Wednesday at 5:30 at Post Office Pub. Please come. We've posted that meeting for the board, because I know a few board members are going. Should be a good time. Food, stations, including master plan stations, the ability to take our business, the EDC rather, their business survey, to provide critical feedback about how we can improve the business climate in town, and there'll also be other informational sessions. So 5:30 to 8:30, Post Office Pub. Please come if you can. And please also take the survey, which you can find by contacting myself or the planning department email address. I already explained about the mixed use DLTA funding award that we received. Right now, it's really been so incredibly busy with the current hearings that we have that's been kind of more of my focus. We're doing annual report work now. I have submitted a draft to Natalia. Natalia is just doing some of the just inputting data, so that should be ready to go by the 31st. And I'm working with Graves Engineering on some construction compliance work, trying to get a more foolproof system for monitoring projects that are under construction, which has been going really well. And so happy to answer any questions or talk about anything specific. Hoping I covered everything. I think so.
Any questions for staff?
Tonight.
Okay, we did,
Actually, sorry, one more thing, and Justin, you might be interested to hear this, that the GEMA, Grafton Emergency Management agent, reached out to me as well as the police chief to try and reinvigorate the Institute Woods feasibility study. So that's going to be a conversation that I'm having. I've explained to them the history, and I think they still want to press on, so I'll keep you posted about that.
Thank you.
That's it.
Quick question on the budgeting process too. Do we submit like that once a year to the finance committee, or how does the budget process work for the planning board?
Yeah, so that's a good question. This is my first time doing this, so I'm not a total expert. And Natalia, feel free to weigh in if I'm doing this wrong. But what we set the budget. We had a deadline to set it with our what we would like to see and explanations as to why by December 22nd. We received, and we had to upload that into the online system by that point. And then now that budget for planning department, board, is undergoing FinCom approval on this Wednesday. And I know that the TA's office is finalizing the budget. There's a select board meeting about it tomorrow evening, and then FinCom is on Wednesday. So it's about a month in between asks and approvals, but the planning board,
The planning board that does not have a budget separate from the planning department. Right,
yeah.
The board's expenses are included in the department.
Yeah, and it's a little confusing because sometimes the ledgers that are printed out by the accounting department say board, but it's really us.
Yeah,
So
I might have
I'm
said
like,
board by accident too, but I meant the
yeah, it's kind of
department,
it's
yeah.
hard to that threw me off at first. I was like,
Yeah.
wait,
And
should I be?
the other thing of note too is that every department submits a budget to basically the town administrator. You know, town administrator's office is responsible for sharing that to to finance committee, discussing it, getting the department heads to talk to FinCom as well, and the town administrator is responsible for essentially balancing the budget and making sure
Right.
the line items match. And that's legally required. Mm-hmm. So,
Is there any like it'd be interesting to be somewhat involved, just kind of looking at like current run rate and like how they think about putting that together. I'm not sure how if that's all done in the FinCom meetings or.
Yeah, probably. Because again, my first year doing it, so I'm not.
Or even if it's just like high level stuff that we can look at some point when it's like preliminary but hasn't been completely
town administrator's
finalized
office
yet.
will have like the full budget, from like probably the preliminary one for this year and past years, and you can finance committee has most of their meetings are recorded, so they're online too, and of course they're all public meetings, so you can attend those too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll follow up with that information and go. I have not been.
More just out of curiosity than anything else.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I personally have not been as a department head invited to the FinCom meeting, so I'm wondering if there's another FinCom meeting that we might need to justify what we're asking increases for. but-
Typically, you probably remember this from last year. Typically, after some of the initial budget, the budgeting is put together. And I don't know, maybe the FinCom isn't doing this anymore, but they used to. The FinCom used to meet individually with the department heads to discuss that department's budget.
Oh yes, that's right. Yes. I met with Sue Robbins last year, who was guiding me through that. So I think that will probably that was closer to summer.
Yeah, that typically takes place. I think their budget meetings are February and March timeframe.
Oh, okay.
A little before town meeting, basically.
And then the fiscal year is what, July 1st? So
Yeah.
July 1 through June 30 is the fiscal year. But yeah, the budget is obviously voted on at town meeting in May.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it kind of goes through a number of rounds of review. From the initial department head submitting their request, town administrator reviewing those and making recommendations. Usually town administrator spends a fair amount of time talking with the department heads to kind of nail that down, and then that starts going in before the finance committee. Finance committee members typically, the different finance committee members are assigned to meet with different departments at their convenience. And again, I don't know if I want to say, I think the finance committee, excuse me, I know they always used to do it. Things changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but the finance committee would typically have all day Saturday meetings, 2 or 3 Saturdays in March, to sort of for the entire finance committee to review each department's budget. So the department head would meet with the entire, first meet with an individual FinCom member to talk about the budget, and then would meet with the entire FinCom. All this before the FinCom ends up making their recommendation on the budget, sort of, and in the end, that generally, they sort of reconcile it. The FinCom sometimes recommends changes to what the town administrator is recommending, but they kind of get that all worked out in the end by around the end of March.
Yes, that was a way better explanation than what I could provide.
I don't know. I used to know somebody who was on the finance committee for like
Yeah,
25
certain
years.
somebody, yeah,
I learned a little bit about how
certain
they
wonderful
operate.
person. Yeah, she's great. But yes, so we'll connect about that, and if you have any other questions, happy to do that. I think I'll probably listen in on that meeting as if I can on Wednesday. Oh, actually, I can't because we have the business owners meeting, so never mind. But okay, I think that's all I've got.
That's it for, anybody have anything else for Fiona? We did correspondence, is there anything else in correspondence anybody wanted to touch on? Reports from planning board representatives and town committees and CMRPC. As the board's representative on the Open Space and Rec Committee, let me just sort of follow up on what we discussed earlier, that the committee actually met last week, and not much to report. The Trails Committee has gotten off the ground and is now beginning to work on their mission. So that's sort of the Open Space and Rec Committee's job was complete when the Trails Committee was formed, and now they've got their own action items.
Nice.
And the parcel prioritization project is in process. The folks at CMRPC have made some progress in putting together a GIS model to capture and summarize all the parameters that we looked at. Perhaps by the next Open Space and Rec Committee meeting, which, by the way, is, I haven't yet sent notified you and Matt and company, but it's going to be February 15th.
Okay.
Normally, the committee meets on the third Wednesday of the month, but the third Wednesday of February is in the middle of school vacation week. You can never get a quorum together for that.
Right.
And the second Wednesday is the 14th. You probably don't want to have meetings on Valentine's Day.
Yes, that wouldn't be ideal.
It looks like the 15th, and as I mentioned briefly earlier, the committee is collecting the status reports from all of the agencies that are responsible for action items, and we've got that's necessary input for our annual report, which will go into the town's annual report.
Perfect. I will make a point to be there on the.
That's what the OSRC has done so far. But I'll follow up with you and Matt and everybody to sort of make sure everybody's aware that the committee's next meeting is the 15th, and whether they have anything ready for us to review or just another status report, either way, that's fine.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, I don't want to make that to try to rush them into getting the work done. Give it the time it takes to get it done and done right.
Right. Exactly.
I think Bob's hand is up.
Bob.
Yeah, actually, Fiona's really touched on it, but I'm our delegate to CMRPC, and as it so happens, I sit on the committee that votes on those DLTA grants, and so I was there, and I voted for it, and it passed, I think, unanimously.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's a long meeting that night.
Any other reports from planning board members, representatives, and town committees and CMRPC? Hearing none. Are there any other items which may lawfully come before the board? I don't think I'm going to ask for a vote to extend the meeting past 10.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn. Mr. Davidson.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Uh,
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. This meeting is adjourned.